Thanks for tuning in. I'm Ben Aston, and this is the Digital Project Manager podcast. As project managers, we're masters of getting stuff done. But what are the tricks for getting more stuff done, and that stuff that we're getting it done better? Today, I'm joined by Cedric Waldburger. Cedric, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me, Ben. I'm glad to be here.
Let me tell you a bit about Cedric. He's an interesting guy to talk to from a project management perspective because he somehow manages to do a lot of stuff. He founded his first company when he was 14. He's built various tech companies. He's invested in lots more. And he currently works on a productivity startup, which is why he is here today, called Zen Tasks, which we'll be talking about shortly. But he's involved in all kinds of interesting companies, including cryptocurrency. But he also, interestingly, spreads his time across lots of different places. He doesn't have an apartment anymore, and he claims to only have 64 things, which you can read all about on his blog, 64things.com. But I'm really going to be picking Cedric's brain today on how to get more stuff done. And I think as project managers, this is a really important thing for us to get hold of and master, because there never seems to be enough time to do everything. But before we dive into that, Cedric, why don't we find out a bit more about you? Can you tell us what your story is? I kind of gave an overview there of you starting your first company at 14, but how is it that you're doing what you're doing right now?
Yeah, definitely. You already mentioned it. I started my first company early on, and I think ever since then I've been infected with the startup bug. I'm fascinated with the process of building a company and super interested in deconstructing this process of how am I going to get from an idea that I had at the bar last night to 1 million. And 1 million could mean 1 million users, 1 million packages shipped, or a million revenue. And this process just fascinates me so much that I've optimized a lot of things in my life to be part of many different companies and just try to deconstruct that process as often and in as many scenarios as possible.
So have you got any sneaky ideas? What ideas did you have at the bar last night?
Yeah.
What should we...
I was actually, so this is a special week. I'm actually doing Air Force service in the Swiss Air Force right now. And I'm just amazed by how many inefficiencies I see every week that I spend here. So plenty of ideas on how to do things better.
Cool. So you've got you're doing lots of different things, but you talk about, flying around the place, not actually living anywhere in particular, but what do you actually do? Like, I know you travel, I know you're involved, but what's the kind of extent of your involvement? When you go to place, what are you doing?
Yeah, so right now there's 3 companies that I'm working on. I spend about 50% of my time on SendTask, the productivity tool. And that one is completely distributed, so we don't even have an office with that company. But then the other 2 companies, the cryptocurrency and the computer vision company, they have offices in the US and in Europe. And so just to meet those teams, I hit Berlin, Zurich, Miami, and San Francisco quite often. And then in between that, there's conferences that I go to, or sometimes also just fun trips, because I've organized my life so that I can work from anywhere. Sometimes I also just choose to be somewhere and spend time with a friend that I haven't seen in a while and work from that place.
Sounds fun. But tell me, what is a computer vision company? What is computer vision?
Oh, yeah. So what we do is we've written an algorithm that analyzes images that come from cameras. And we use it to help bars to analyze transactions and match the record that we get from the cameras to their POS system to detect fraud. And we're basically building a Google Analytics for bars.
For bars?
For bars and restaurants, yeah.
Okay. And what can people do with these insights then, so they can work out the likelihood of someone, like how much time they'll spend at a table, how much money they might spend, that kind of things?
So the biggest use case right now is that, and we've discovered this a few years ago because one of my co-founders was in the bar and restaurant space. He managed a bar before, and what he saw is that you typically lose between 10 and 25% of your revenue just because drinks are not rung up properly. Now, some of this is just fraud or people are stealing your money. Other times it's just forgotten. And so it's a pretty big problem if the average American bar does about $4 million in annual revenue. So you lose between $500,000 and $1 million per year. And as you can imagine, with a problem this big, there's many solutions. There's people putting RFID chips on bottles or even weight scales underneath each bottle. There's services that send people into your bar to just watch your staff. But it's all kind of not very elegant, and it's a big financial effort to implement these systems. Whereas for us, we just plug into the security cameras that you usually already have, and we use our software to cut down from a 2-hour-long video covering a shift to just the 50 images that capture when a transaction actually happened. So when a beer or a Coke or whatever was actually handed out. And then we automatically also match that to your point of sale system. And so the next day you get a report saying, hey, last night we saw 500 transactions, and 100 of them could not be properly linked to the POS system. So you should check in with these employees and look at these transactions and see if you can train them better to reduce this rate of false transactions.
Fancy stuff. That sounds interesting. So that's one of them. That's one of the companies. That's not one of them that you're spending lots of your time on now, or it is?
It is, yeah. That's one of the three.
Okay.
So yeah, it's called Glimpse. So that one and the cryptocurrency, Dfinity, is where I spend about half my time, and then the other half I spend on SendTask.
So yeah, I'm interested in cryptocurrencies, as everyone seems to be this year, with like Bitcoin hitting $10,000. So where do you fit into that? Like, it seems like there's a new cryptocurrency about to be released like every day. Everyone's jumping on board now. So what are you guys doing exactly? Yeah,
so what we're doing is we're building a new blockchain, which is a lot of the currencies that you see coming up, or tokens that you see being released day by day. A lot of them are just Ethereum ERC20 tokens, meaning they're all built on top of Ethereum, which is great because Ethereum provides you with this, like the capability to create smart contracts and do a lot of stuff on the Ethereum ecosystem. But we're building a completely separate blockchain because we're building a much, much faster and more scalable version of Ethereum. One way to look at it is that in Ethereum, it takes you about 15 minutes to get to finality, meaning you are certain that the transaction actually went through because there's a few blocks after the one where your transaction was recorded. So that takes about 15 minutes on Ethereum, which, if you think about it, is not very practical if you're doing that. If you want to pay for something in Ethereum in a store or some other real life situation. And so in our system, because we're not using proof of work, we're using proof of stake, which is a different consensus mechanism. It only takes 0.9 seconds to get to finality.
So what's proof of stake then? How does that work?
So proof of stake means a new block is not found by solving all these math riddles that current proof of work algorithms use, but by putting up some of your money and then using an algorithm to determine who gets to create the next block. And we do that by something that we call threshold relay, which is we've basically found a way to create random numbers in this distributed, decentralized setup and choose some clients randomly who are then picked to create the next block and get rewarded for that.
Interesting. Yeah, because I know that the whole challenge around like the backlog of transactions on Bitcoin, like slowing things down, and then the forking that was going to happen that now isn't happening, but obviously that impacts performance. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with cryptocurrencies over the next couple of years. But it seems like in just the past few months, it's insane what's going on. So is it a bubble? Do you think it's a bubble, or what do you think is going to happen? What's your prediction?
I think it's very hard to say what the actual value of a Bitcoin is because there's no counterpart in the real world. And I think there's definitely, like, one example that tells me that now it's hitting mainstream is one of the companies that I'm invested in is the largest e-commerce site for sex toys in Switzerland. And so up and until about 6 or 9 months ago, like when I met friends, like that company was usually the one that got the most interest. Everyone wanted to know what's new on the market and what works how. And now it's all about crypto. And just the fact that crypto is so much more interesting and catches people's attention more than sex toys, I think tells me a lot about how big the attention is that this space is getting right now. Yeah.
Fun stuff. So you're going around, you're working with these different companies, but what's your role? What's your role within them? What are the kind of challenges that you're dealing with in your different startups that you're working with?
Yeah. So for SendTask, I'm the sole founder, CEO, CTO, and I have a lot of I'm wearing a lot of different hats. For the other two, I'm more of a COO type of founder. So I have someone who runs the day-to-day, but I help out with the organization and helping them build processes and keeping everyone on the same page. And for a lot of years, I thought it's a big dilemma that I'm not able to focus on. I'm just too curious. I can't focus on just one company for some reason. And for a long time, it's been a struggle. But then recently, what I've realized is that what it forces me to do is work on the companies and not in the companies so much. And by that, what I mean is like really focus on building the right processes for other people to execute and creating the environment that allows other people to be most efficient. So for example, for SendTask, being CEO for me means only two things. One is I'm kind of setting up the guidelines and keeping everyone aligned with our general vision. And the other job is I'm making sure everyone has all the tools and processes and the environment that they need to be most effective. And that's basically my only two tasks, which is still a lot, but like focusing on just that really helps me scale the company really well, because I don't involve myself in the day-to-day processes so much.
Yeah, interesting. And so, so how do you manage everything? How do you keep track of? You're involved in 3 different companies, like right now, and you're trying to create these like frameworks for the companies to succeed. So what's in your toolkit? How do you keep track of everything that you're doing?
Yeah, because the companies are kind of spread out between San Francisco, Miami, Zurich, and Berlin. There's also a lot of time zone differences. And so about 2 years ago, I realized I need to become really good at working asynchronously with people, meaning just because of the time zone differences, it's hard to get people on the phone sometimes. And I use mainly 2 tools, I think, with the teams. One is Slack, which I think is phenomenal. It's a lot of fun to work with Slack, and it's great to stay in touch with people all around the globe. And then the other tool that I, of course, use very often is SendTask. And we've connected the 2 of them. So we've built a Slack integration for SendTask. So just briefly, SendTask is a shared task manager. So it allows you to keep track of your tasks and priorities. And what we've seen in the past before we had SendTask is that very often in Slack, we would discuss a problem or a feature or a customer feedback, and we will come to a conclusion, but then the conversation kind of died there. Or sometimes 2 people will put it on their to-do list, but very often it was not clear like who's going to work on this now and who's going to resolve this issue. So what we've built with SendTask is a very simple integration in Slack where you can just say, /SendTask, hey, Ben, can you please send me that, or can you please build that feature until next Wednesday? And then from that, SendTask automatically creates a task that's assigned to you, has the right due date, so next Wednesday, and the right title, and provides you with a link to go back into that conversation to find all the details. So that's been really helpful. And those are the two main tools I think that help me keep on track and on the same page with the teams.
Cool. So so how big is your team then on SendTask? I'm intrigued. Like you've built a project management. You're focusing on task management. How there's loads of them out there. But tell me about your team that you've got working on SendTask.
Yeah. So the SendTask team right now is 11 people in 10 different countries, and we got started in February. We released our first beta or alpha product the month after in March this year. And we just released an iOS app. We're close to releasing the Android app. So we're all about lean processes and getting stuff out, testing it with real customers and real users, and then improving quickly. Most of these people have a technology background. So a lot of us are developers. And then we also have someone who helps us with content, writing, and of course, design and user experience.
Cool. And so what made you, I get the idea of, distributed teams, but in my experience, it can be challenging. And what you're describing sounds crazy to me. Like you have a team of 11 people or something in 10 different countries, and how many different time zones? That's probably at least 3. What made you choose to work like in this distributed way?
Yeah, so we started building SendTask when I was already traveling a lot. And so when I realized I want to start this company, I asked myself, where do I set it up? Because I'm never in the same place for too long anyway. And then I thought maybe it could be a cool experiment to see if I can kind of transfer my personal lifestyle, which is living without a flat or a constant apartment or a constant home, to see if that can be transferred to how to build a company, meaning a company without an office. And there's obviously a lot of downsides and upsides. I think the downsides are it's a bit harder to keep everyone on the same page. You need to build processes to stay in touch and also see people from time to time. But there's also a lot of upsides. One of them being that everyone can be extremely flexible with their work hours. So we don't require people to start at 8 and finish at 5. That's something that I've learned when I was working as a software developer, is that sometimes I just don't feel productive in the morning, but I get very productive from 2 p.m. till 2 a.m. And so I feel like I want to give people a chance to work when they're most productive and be flexible with their time. And on the other hand, it gives us a great opportunity to hire the best talent from anywhere. Whereas if I'm hiring in Berlin or Zurich or Miami or even San Francisco, the talent pool is always much, much smaller than if I can just hire from plus minus 3 time zones.
Yeah. So how many time zones are you working across?
I think it's 5 right now, not counting mine, which changes every few days.
Yeah. And so do you even do things like daily scrums or weekly meetings, or what's the kind of cadence of your getting everyone aligned and meeting together?
Yeah, so it starts with us meeting every 90 days. So once a quarter, we bring people together, because I think building a company is very much about the company that you're building it with, meaning the people behind it. So you can have the greatest processes in the world. I think in the end, it always comes down to how people get along with each other and aligning everyone. So we do fly everyone to the same location once a quarter, every 90 days. And what we do, and we use that week to do team building, get to know each other outside work and create some fun experiences. But then we also use that time to think about the tough and hard problems that come up in our business. So what is SendTask? Who is our target customer? Stuff like this. And then towards the end, the last 2 days, we usually use to lay out the roadmap for the next 90 days until we get together again. And we kind of create weekly or bi-weekly milestones for what everyone is going to be working on. And then when everyone goes back to their where they work from, it allows us to be super efficient with very little synchronous communication. So we only get on a call once a week for about 45 minutes, where we discuss updates and we call them talking points, basically stuff that people think are better handled talking to each other than in writing. And we also use that call for a bit of fun. Usually at the end, we solve a riddle together. So we're all very passionate about creative problem solving and like tough problems. And so every week, someone else presents a riddle for the whole group and tries to make it as difficult as possible, because we've gotten pretty good at it.
That's cool. So what do you think, so for someone else who's kind of working with a distributed team, what for you are the kind of the secrets to making remote working work? What have you found are the kind of the most essential things to making the remote working kind of achievable?
I think for us, it was, or it is, a lot about first becoming conscious of the up and downsides of what it means to working remotely and what that means for each and every role. I think creating a software product is something that really lends itself well to this remote setup, because once people have all the information that they need, they can work very independently. Once they're onboarded, they know the system and they understand our processes. But I think we also reassess how we do work together every 90 days. Like every time we get together, we talk about what has worked well, what hasn't worked well. We give each other feedback. So I think it's, as with every other company, it's all about like evolving and being open for feedback and adapting your processes to making them better. So I think that's one thing. And the other component for me that's super essential is that, as I said, it's all about the people and creating space and time where we can get to know each other and see who's behind that work persona, figure out what they like and how they are in their free time.
Cool. And so let's kind of go back to SendTask for a second. So where did the idea of actually coming up with creating a project management tool come from? Like there are stacks of other project management tools out there. Lots of them do lots more than just task management. So what made you and obviously like the classics like everyone's tends to use or default or know, like Asana and Basecamp. So how's SendTask different from that, and kind of what's your roadmap for SendTask?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I think just because it is such a crowded place, I did not want to build this company or this product for a very long time. I was trying to find another tool that does what we are building now. The idea came up quite some time ago when my first company that I started early on was an agency business. We would build websites and brochures and logos for many different clients and work with many different freelancers. And we also had an internal team of about 15 people. We still do. The company's still running. I'm just not involved in the day-to-day anymore. But at some point, we realized, and we used Asana, we realized that using Asana or any other task manager is just so much more efficient than using email to assign tasks to each other. One, it's so much easier to keep track of who's working on what. It's easier to keep each other updated on if some deadlines shift. There's just so many benefits that we never wanted to go back. We also created a ton of checklists, so we never have to think about, let's say when we release a website, like which are the steps that we need to check. Yeah. So for internal teams, it makes so much sense and it made us so much more efficient. But then what I saw is that whenever we talk to a client or a supplier, we would still fall back into our old habits and use email, which to me just doesn't make sense. We figured out how using tasks for this type of communication is so much more efficient. Why do we fall back into our old habits and use email, which has all the downsides of losing tasks, and you're trying to keep in the back of your mind who you've assigned what for what deadline and so on. And I've asked myself one, and I think there's two reasons. One is for a client that I especially if I only work with them infrequently, I don't want to force them to create yet another account to get started. We all have hundreds of accounts and different passwords, and it's a hassle.
Yeah.
And the second thing is I was looking for something that was so intuitive that I would not have to sit down first with a client and talk through how we're going to use Asana or what our workflow is for Trello or whatnot. And so those were the two things that I was looking for. So an instant start without forcing someone to create an account first, and something that's so intuitive and foolproof that I don't need to sit down with them first and discuss how we're going to use this. And I think I've tested 48 different product management tools. I couldn't find any one that offered, especially the first feature, because I think the second one is more soft, but being able to just start collaborating with someone without them first creating an account just doesn't exist. And that's how we decided to build SendTask. And so the way it works is you can assign a task to anyone as long as you know their email address. And what happens on the other end is they get an email with the task description and all the info they need to know about it. And then they can either reply to the email to leave a comment, or they can just click on a link in that email to open up the task. And that authenticates them, and they can just work with that task as if they had an account. So it's very good for like a quick, simple start if you just want to collaborate with someone, not via email, but via task manager. Cool.
And so, and what's your kind of vision, and what's the roadmap for SendTask? Where do you go from here?
Yeah, so we see SendTask as the place where you prioritize your own tasks, but you also delegate and you catch up with other people's priorities and see what they've done with the tasks that you've sent to them. And our vision is that it should not be yet another app that you need to use, but that you can create tasks and send them to SendTask from where you already work a lot of your time. So, for example, I've mentioned the Slack integration that we've done, which is super helpful for a lot of our users because it allows them to create tasks and also check on their priorities right from Slack without ever going to the SendTask website. And we've done the same with an email integration where you can convert emails into tasks and vice versa really quickly. So I think the long-term vision is to make work fun again, or at least making it fun to break big problems down into smaller steps so that big problems or big goals become a lot more achievable.
Cool. So let's talk about as well your going back to this idea of you're minimalizing your life, and in terms of you're doing loads of different things. And if I was trying to do all the different things you were doing as well as traveling around, I think I'd have gone mad. So what are your life hacks? How do you kind of keep this whole slew of things, all these plates that you've got spinning? How do you manage that? What's your kind of tricks for doing life when you've got too much to do?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I use SendTask a lot to keep on top of what I have to do and get done today, this week, and so on. So one of the life hacks that's been super efficient or awesome for me is that every morning I just spend the first 10-15 minutes on getting a good idea of my day and what I want to get achieved. And also I split up my day into two halves. Usually I start pretty early. I get to the office at about 6 until 1 p.m. So for a good 7 hours, I don't take any calls or meetings. I just work on the long-term priorities and the stuff that I want to get done. And this includes stuff like reading, if I want to learn more about a certain topic. It includes writing, but it also includes building prototypes or brainstorming stuff. And then at 1 p.m., I feel like my day has already been super successful because I got a lot of stuff done that I had planned for that day. And now my head is pretty free to react. And so from 1 p.m. until the evening, I take calls, I take meetings, dinners, and splitting up my day into these two halves where it's not one meeting and then 1 hour of uninterrupted time and then another call, but like these two big blocks of dedicated time for myself and for others has been extremely awesome for me. Like I feel like in the middle of the day, I already feel like I've achieved a lot, and that makes me happy. And then I'm even more productive in the afternoon.
Yeah, that's the challenge. I'm just trying to like relate that back to the kind of life of a project manager. It would be awesome if you could tell clients, sorry guys, but we're only doing meetings in the afternoon. Like in the morning, we're doing our own work.
So what I've seen when I was working at MediaSign, the agency business, is that maybe it was hard to block off like 3/4 of a day, but because I usually, so business here starts between 8 and 9, so getting to the office like 3 hours before most of my clients started to work already helped me to get a lot done. And then they usually also were pretty understanding, like they understood if I didn't take calls before, let's say 11 a.m. So that already gave me like a 5-hour block of time where I could just get stuff done. And then of course I would make myself available for emergencies, but other than that, I just tried to call them back later that day.
Nice. There you go. There's a good tip. Tell the clients you're unavailable. See what happens. But what would you say would be kind of one takeaway for? I mean, you've been in the agency business. You understand what it's like to be a project manager and a product manager. But what would you say in terms of you've kind of minimalized your life? You've kind of created these kind of structure and processes to be more efficient and be more effective, so you can get more stuff done. Where for you is the starting point and the kind of first few steps to being more efficient and getting more stuff done?
I think for me, a lot of it is about priorities and being very clear about priorities. So, for example, I've decided that for the past few years and probably the next one or a few years, my main priority is to learn as much about building a company as possible. And once I've realized that that's my priority, I was also able or willing to make sacrifices in other places of my life. As you mentioned, like I've given for the last 1.5 years, I have not had an apartment. I have not had a constant home. I only have as much stuff as fits into my backpack. And I travel an insane amount of time. I think this year alone, I spent about 20 hours on planes and 20 days on planes. And then the next step for me was just becoming conscious of what that means and then building the right processes to deal with the downsides of that lifestyle. For example, I listen to a ton of podcasts and audiobooks because that's what I can do when I'm waiting in line for security at an airport or while I'm boarding a plane or just time that would otherwise be wasted or very unproductive.
Cool. And so in terms of in terms of like a takeaway for people in terms of thinking about how they kind of go back to to be more minimalist, what was that kind of process like for you when you decided, okay, hold on, I'm going to get rid of 99% of my life? Was that an easy process for you, or like how did that come about?
So I realized I started to travel more and more, and I had mostly only access to the stuff that I was able to bring with me anyway. And then I had this idea for an experiment, or I was just curious, and I'm very left brain, so I work very well with my brain works very well with numbers. So I had this idea for this experiment I wanted to know how much stuff do I actually own. And I started going through my apartment and creating this spreadsheet of stuff that I owned. And I wrote down 5 black t-shirts and 3 pairs of shoes and 2 leather jackets and so on. And as soon as I had that, I had a number, right? I think back then it was you're probably right. I got rid of about 90% of stuff since then. So I had about 700 things back then. And as soon as I had a number, it was something that I kind of wanted to optimize. And I asked myself, if I could only own one type of t-shirt, which t-shirt would it be? If I can only have one type of shoes, which type of shoes would I want to own? And I really enjoy these kind of questions. It's almost philosophical, but from there on, like I started to think about like how can I consolidate like these three type of shoes that I have into just one. Shoes are bulky, and you really only want to have one. So I have one pair of shoes plus Vibrams, which I use for hiking, and it's like these toe or finger shoes. So that was the first step, like thinking about what do I really need, and of which item, which brand or model is the best for most of my, like the situations that I will be in. And then from there on, what I've used is, I call it the 90 day process. So every 90 days, I kind of look at the stuff that I still have. I look at this spreadsheet and I ask myself, what items have I not used in the last 90 days? And am I probably not going to use in the next 90 days? So by that, I cover half a year, and half a year is a pretty long time span. It usually involves like cold days, warm days, formal activities, informal activities. And so if I can't think of a situation where I'm going to use that item, I put it away. I put it in a bag and I leave it at my parents' place or a friend's place. Because often there's this emotional hurdle of getting rid of stuff. But by just putting it in a bag and putting it in a corner, that's much easier than giving it away straight away. And then 90 days later, so far, I've never taken anything out of that bag because I've never had the need to go back and pick something from it. So 90 days later, it becomes really easy to donate or give it away or sell that stuff. And and from there, it's just been like iterating over and over again. I'm actually down to 48 items now. When I gave up on my apartment, I had 64. Now I'm down to 48, and they're all black.
The interesting thing for me is that you must depend though on having a very efficient washing cycle. So for your clothes to be washed and then dried and to be back into circulation, to only have 48 things, you must be very efficient at keeping your either not getting dirty or keeping your clothes very clean. Because I'm sure I've got 48 things that are waiting to be waiting for me to wash them right now. But so that's all good. Yeah, and if I have clothing for like full 7 days, and then I need to wash. And because everything is it's all black, so I can do it all in one go. I can just wash once, and most of my stuff is from like a fabric that dries really quickly and wrinkle free. So it's pretty efficient. I've optimized for that. Yeah. I've checked out. So if you go to 64things.com, you can check out Cedric's list, which includes a few Vancouver classics like Lululemon and Kitten Ace, which are the Cedric's kind of like the classic persona for someone like Kitten Ace. It's a guy on the go who kind of wants flexible clothing. You're like the perfect guy for it.
Exactly. Yeah, I love their clothing. I think it's great for the type of travel that I do, and like how often I need to wash it and how durable it needs to be, but still look kind of formal.
Technical cashmere. That's what it's all about. Cool. Cedric, thank you so much for joining us. It's been great having you with us today.
Likewise. Thank you for having me.
Cool. And if you'd like to contribute to the conversation, comment on the post on the blog, or head over to the community section of the digitalprojectmanager.com to join our Slack team, where you'll find lots of interesting conversations going on there. But until next time, thanks for listening.